Clark, step back three. Oh, she hit it and draws the foul. Welcome back, Caitlin Clark.
I always wanted Geno to call me just because he's Geno. Like, he's one of the best coaches of all time.
If you're a college player and you're a great college player, like Caitlin was, the delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying the disrespect that they've shown to the WNBA. There's a huge target on this kid's back. Okay, this kid's coming into the league. And Diana said it best. This kid's in for a rude awakening.
Like Geno Auriemma could be the reason why Caitlin Clark is definitely not joining the unrivaled 3-on-3 basketball league.
It almost looks like Geno Auriemma could be the reason why Caitlin Clark is definitively not joining the unrivaled 3-on-3 basketball league. Revenge is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it arrives calm, calculated, and deadly quiet. For Caitlin Clark, payback was never about clapping back online or throwing shade in front of cameras. She played it colder than that. One decision did all the talking. She declined the call. She turned down Geno Auriemma. She walked away from UConn's history, its reputation, and a 7-figure offer that appeared after years of silence. Legendary UConn women's basketball coach Geno Auriemma is an investor in Unrivaled, the new 3-on-3 women's basketball league founded by former UConn standouts Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart. Once again, the UConn machine was flexing its influence in the world of women's basketball. To most people, it made no sense. 8 weeks of basketball for more than $1 million sounds like a no-brainer. That kind of deal usually gets signed before the ink even dries. But this offer was never just about money. It was a lifeline thrown by someone who had once overlooked her, minimized her, and treated her as if she was never that important in the first place.
Like I said earlier, they actually had odds that, you know, she was like 3rd or 4th in the betting odds to be MVP of the WNBA. That's such a slap in the face to every WNBA player. It's unbelievable.
By saying no, Clark did more than reject a contract. She stripped away his leverage. That is why this moment matters beyond the court. This is not a highlight reel story. It is about control and who holds it. For decades, Geno Auriemma sat at the center of women's basketball, deciding which players mattered and which ones faded into the background. His program shaped careers, and his approval was treated as everything. Caitlin Clark proved it was not. She built her own momentum without his system, without his voice, and without his resources. When he finally reached out, the roles had already flipped. The power had changed hands. Her response said everything without saying anything at all. She did not need the connection anymore. Every revenge story traces back to a single mistake, and Geno's mistake was not tactical. It was personal. He underestimated her.
That's the worst part about new fans. You know, they have no perspective. There's no context. So they just say ridiculous nonsense.
Long before sold-out crowds and record-breaking ratings, Clark was simply a young player chasing an opportunity. She has said it herself. UConn felt like the dream destination, the dynasty, the place where legends were made, the highest level of the game. For a young player growing up in Iowa, it did not get bigger than UConn. That was the dream. When recruiting season arrived, everything seemed perfectly aligned. The most electric talent of her generation pairing with the most powerful recruiter the sport had ever known. On paper, it felt inevitable, but reality was different. The phone never rang. Geno never called.
I wanted UConn to recruit me. I always wanted Geno to call me just because he's Geno. Like, he's one of the best coaches of all time. Geno never called me.
He did not reach out to Clark. He did not contact her parents. He barely expressed interest through an AAU coach. For someone known as the ultimate talent evaluator, the silence said everything. It was not accidental. It was deliberate, and it sent a message that could not be ignored. She was not a priority. The explanation came later. UConn already had Paige Buchers locked in, and Geno claimed he did not want 2 point guards. At first, that reasoning might have sounded reasonable. Then came the part that crossed the line. Geno suggested that if Clark truly wanted UConn, she should have called him. Let that sink in. A coach whose reputation was built on pursuing generational talent decided she was not worth a phone call, then turned around and blamed a teenager for not chasing him harder. That was not just a recruiting miss. It was a clear act of disrespect, the kind that stays with you. Clark did not make noise about it. She did not complain or campaign for attention. She simply remembered it. If Geno did not believe in her, she would find a place that did. That decision led her to Iowa. No dynasty banners, no automatic spotlight, no borrowed prestige. To outsiders, it looked like settling. To Clark, it was freedom.
I would have thought that all those years ago, back in Des Moines, Iowa, that this would be the case right now. And obviously we can see that it's done pretty darn well, and people are excited to see her play at every level.
At Iowa, she was not Paige's backup plan or Geno's forgotten option. She was the centerpiece. The program was hers to carry. From the moment she stepped onto the court in Iowa City, everything shifted. Those deep logo shots were not just highlights, they were statements. Packed arenas were not hype, they were confirmation. Record-breaking television numbers were not luck, they were proof. Every basket added pressure. Every viral clip and every shattered record sent the same quiet message. You let this slip. While the numbers kept climbing, Geno chose not to reflect. He doubled down. Instead of showing respect, he leaned into dismissive commentary. He brushed her off with smug remarks, calling her a kid and saying she played like she was just messing around in a driveway. Rather than acknowledge a once-in-a-generation force, he tried to shrink her game into something casual and small. But small does not fill Madison Square Garden. Small does not pull women's basketball into the mainstream. Small does not rewrite media deals or shift culture. And that is where the irony cuts deepest. Geno shut the door when Caitlin Clark knocked. He assumed she would blend in, become another solid name that faded with time. Instead, she built the biggest brand the women's game has ever seen, and she did it without him. When he finally came back with a contract in hand, Clark did not lash out. She did not celebrate. She did not explain herself. She said no. That single word cut deeper than any postseason loss.
Now, there's a lot of investors in this league. One investor, been trying to keep quiet about, his investment in the league ever since his comments that he made about a young rookie. Pretty much, had him in the headlines for about a month and a half. That is Geno Auriemma, dog. I'm here to tell you, he's part owner of this league.
It cost him relevance, control, and the illusion that he still dictated the future of the sport. Still, Geno could not let go. Anytime Clark's name surfaced, he found a way to tether her back to Paige Bueckers. If Clark played fearlessly, Paige did too. If Clark connected with fans, Paige had already done it. This was not coincidence. It was positioning. By linking Clark's rise to players from his own system, Geno kept himself anchored in the conversation. But people noticed. Fans noticed. Analysts noticed. Coaches noticed. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Clark did not need comparisons or disclaimers. She was drawing crowds larger than most professional teams. She was breaking records no one had touched before. She was changing the way people talked about women's basketball. And there was Geno, smiling for the cameras, quietly gripping a throne that was already slipping away. Beneath the polished image sat insecurity, the kind that creeps in when attention begins to drift and there is no way to pull it back. Over time, subtle jabs were no longer enough. Geno shifted from quietly minimizing Clark to openly targeting the people who stood behind her. For months, his approach had been criticism disguised as analysis. Then came June of 2024. During an appearance on the Dan Patrick Show, he went too far. A Hall of Fame coach, someone meant to represent the highest standard in women's basketball, did more than question Caitlin Clark's impact. He redirected his frustration toward her supporter.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. There were actually odds on she's third or fourth in betting odds on being MVP at the WNBA. These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. Okay, so the kid was set up for failure right from the beginning.
There was no nuance in what he said. He labeled her fans as delusional. He claimed they did not understand the game. Then he went even further, suggesting that their excitement was actually damaging women's basketball. All of this because they believed Clark could finish near the top of MVP voting as a rookie. To Geno, that belief was not enthusiasm or optimism. He framed it as ignorance. Pause on that for a moment. Women's basketball was experiencing a surge unlike anything it had ever seen. New viewers were tuning in. Families were showing up in jerseys. Young fans were lining up just to catch a glimpse of Clark. WNBA broadcasts were drawing in casual viewers who had never watched the league before. And Geno's reaction was not appreciation or excitement. It was dismissal. Instead of embracing the momentum, he pushed against it. This was not a coach offering thoughtful critique or balanced perspective. It was personal, a direct shot at the foundation of Clark's rise. The very fans who helped carry women's basketball into the mainstream spotlight became his target. Once that line was crossed, there was no walking it back. Geno was not just brushing off Caitlin Clark, he was brushing off the people who powered her ascent. And because of who he was, his words carried extra weight. When he labeled her supporters as clueless, it revealed more than frustration. It exposed how deeply he was underestimating her. By dismissing the fans, he was dismissing the movement itself. The message behind his comments was clear. The buzz was fake, the attention would fade, and eventually, reality would catch up and prove him right. That was the bet he made. And it backfired spectacularly. Clark did not rush to social media. She did not fire off quotes or cancel interviews. She did not respond at all. Her answer came where reputations are truly decided, on the court. What followed was not just validation, it was a complete collapse of Geno's credibility. Caitlin Clark captured Rookie of the Year. Then she went even further, earning all WNBA first-team honor. When the MVP voting concluded, she landed exactly where her so-called delusional fans said she would fourth. Right on the mark. The prediction he mocked became fact, and with it, his authority took a visible hit. This was bigger than one player collecting awards. It was a moment of redemption for the fans he laughed at. Every parent who brought their child to a game, every casual viewer who tuned in for the first time, every new supporter who believed the hype, Geno framed them as the problem. Clark proved they saw the future more clearly than he did. The coldest part was how she handled it. No speeches, no back and forth, no drama, just outcomes. Night after night, she delivered deep logo shots, clean crossovers that froze defenders, sharp passes that cracked defenses open, and performances that spoke louder than any comment ever could. By the time the awards arrived, the conversation was already over. She had answered every doubt without ever mentioning his name. There was something fitting about that. Geno had long positioned himself as the ultimate authority on women's basketball, the seasoned voice who believed he understood the game better than the fans, the media, and anyone watching from the outside. But the results told a different story. The fans were right, Clark was right, Geno was wrong. Every sold-out arena, every shattered record, every honor collected, chipped away at the idea that he was still the one who decided what mattered. She did not need his approval then, and she never had. The irony is that Clark was never trying to prove anything to him. She was not chasing validation or fighting a personal feud. He was not the focus at all. She was simply doing what she had always done, playing her game at the highest possible level. And that alone was enough to expose how outdated his stance had become, enough to show the world that the narrative had shifted. By the end of her rookie season, the conversation was no longer about hype. It was about how thoroughly she erased doubt. Geno's remarks aged badly. What once sounded confident now read like some of the worst takes the sport had seen, defensive, bitter, and completely off the mark. Being wrong was something he struggled to accept. At that point, it stopped being just about Clark's performance. It became about what she symbolized, a shift in power, a new era taking hold. Women's basketball no longer revolved around him, and instead of acknowledging that reality, he retreated into habit. More interviews, more podcasts, more attempts to cling to a spotlight that was no longer his. Her name was never far from his mouth, and every time it came up, the same pattern followed. A bit of praise, a subtle jab, a compliment wrapped in caution. The more he talked, the clearer it became. Caitlin Clark was not just breaking records, she was living rent-free in his head. Eventually, words stopped working. For months, Geno tried to steer the narrative through comparisons and side comments. He framed Clark's rise as something familiar, something borrowed, something tied back to his dynasty. He took shots at her fans, brushed off her impact, and tried to keep himself centered in the story. But Clark kept winning. She kept shining, and his grip on the narrative kept slipping. So he changed tactics. If influence could not be maintained through commentary, maybe it could be bought. That is where the money entered the picture. By then, Geno had already exhausted every option. He ignored her during recruiting. He downplayed her breakout. He dismissed the people who followed her. He tried to repackage her stardom as a recycled version of something he had already built. None of it slowed her momentum. Clark kept rising while his relevance continued to fade. Then a new opportunity emerged, dressed up as innovation, a 3-on-3 women's league backed by Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, with Geno heavily involved behind the scenes. The concept had ambition. It had serious financial backing. What it lacked was identity. It needed a face, and that was when everything became clear. For all the respected names attached to the project, only one player could give it instant credibility. Only one athlete could bring millions of fans, massive media attention, and sponsor interest overnight. Only one star had the pull to position the league as a true rival to the WNBA. That star was Caitlin Clark, par 8. And so Geno made the move no one expected. He reached out. Reports later confirmed an offer of more than $1 million for an 8-week season, one of the largest offers ever placed in front of a women's basketball player. Let that settle for a moment. The same coach who once could not be bothered to make a recruiting call was now putting 7 figures on the table, hoping she would rescue his latest project. The same voice that questioned whether her popularity was real was suddenly trying to profit from it. The contradiction could not have been clearer. The coach who mocked her fan base now depended on that same crowd to tune in, buy tickets, and legitimize his league. The people he dismissed were suddenly essential. That irony cut deep. This was never just about business. It was personal. If Geno landed Clark, he could reshape the narrative. He could argue that her rise was still connected to his influence. He could frame her success as another branch of the empire he built, rather than proof that his dominance was no longer required. He could reassert control. But Clark saw through it immediately. When the offer landed in front of her, she did not see opportunity. She saw a test, a final attempt to reclaim power from someone who had spent years minimizing her. Her response came fast and clean. No explanations, no counteroffers, no hesitation. One word, no. It carried more weight than every interview he had given combined. She did not need his money. She did not need his platform. She did not need his validation. The man who once overlooked her was now asking for help, and she declined with quiet precision. That moment sealed it. The rejection was total. Geno Auriemma, long known as a gatekeeper of the sport, had been reduced to offering a fortune to the very player he once dismissed. And she turned it down without spectacle, without bitterness, without drama. Just refusal. The aftermath was unforgiving. Without Clark, the unrivaled league lost its center of gravity. Its appeal weakened almost overnight. What was meant to look bold and powerful instead revealed desperation. The massive offer stopped looking like confidence and started looking like need. The project needed her far more than she ever needed it. Fans understood exactly what they were witnessing. Online reactions poured in, mocking the idea that Clark would save a system that had never respected her. The grand strategy Geno believed he was executing collapsed in a single move. Clark did not rant. She did not embarrass him publicly. She did not even acknowledge him beyond her decision. She walked away, and that silence landed harder than any response ever could, because the truth was unavoidable. Geno's era had passed. His grip on the sport was gone, and Clark did not just challenge it, she rendered it obsolete. For decades, figures like him controlled the routes to success. They shaped the narratives. They decided who mattered and who waited their turn. Clark broke that structure. She did not need banners or borrowed prestige. She did not need approval from the old guard. She built something independent, and by rejecting the $1 million offer, she sent a message that echoed far beyond a single contract. The future belongs to the players, not the gatekeepers. That is why this moment stings so deeply. Geno's greatest mistake was not overlooking her early. It was believing the sport could not thrive without him. He assumed he was essential. She proved otherwise, and that lesson did not stop with him. It served as a warning to every coach, executive, and power broker still clinging to control. Clark's rejection was not just personal. It marked a shift, a clear dividing line between the old structure and what comes next. She showed an entire generation of athletes that they do not need permission to lead. All it took was one quiet decision, one refusal, one no. In the end, this was never just a feud between a coach and a player. It was a warning shot, a reminder that power in women's basketball has permanently shifted. The old model relied on gatekeepers, permission, and approval from the top. Caitlin Clark proved none of that is required anymore. She did not ask to be crowned. She did not demand control. She earned it through fans, through numbers, and through undeniable impact. One quiet decision exposed an entire system that believed it would last forever. And stories like this are happening more often than people realize. Behind the scenes, off the court, away from press conferences and headlines. That is why Courtside Leaks exists. To pull back the curtain and connect the dots the league does not want connected. If you want the real story shaping basketball's future, stay locked in. The next power shift is already happening. We have every angle covered, every leak, every backstage twist, and every moment they will not show you. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video. Stay locked in with WNBA Unfiltered, your home for the truth behind the headlines.